G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder Ground Forces with Mags, and welcome aboard the Australian cruiser tank Mark IV Sentinel. Yes, that's Sentinel, not Thunderbolt. The AC-3, or the Australian cruiser tank Mark III, was the only version of the Sentinel series to actually receive the name Thunderbolt. It's expected that the Mark IV would have received it as well, but it was never officially titled. Now the AC-4 is a rank 3 battle rating 5.0 premium British tank, and it comes armed with a QF 17-pounder main cannon and a 7.7mm Vickers machine gun as a secondary. Now I'm not going to go over all of the tank's details as I've done it before in previous videos and very little has changed since that time. It is still extremely well armoured with some great sloping on the front. It still has one prominent weak point that you have to be very careful to hide when you're engaging targets, and if you do, it can bounce shots from a Tiger in direct combat, although you wouldn't want to rely on it too much. But I guess the biggest question that I often hear about the AC-4 is why were we making it at all? The original AC-1 Sentinel was only armed with a 2-pounder cannon, which was perfectly fine. The AC-1 was never designed to travel overseas and was never designed to engage heavy armour. That 2-pounder cannon was only to deal with the kind of armour that we would have expected from Japanese forces, should they attempt to make a raid on the Australian mainland. And the armour that Japan was commonly using through its island campaigns and Pacific campaign really only barely qualified as armour. The 2-pounder was more than good enough to do the job. However, a problem developed when it was discovered that the Empire of Japan and Nazi Germany were actually trading technology. At that point, there became a potential that a Japanese force invading the Australian mainland could, instead of using Japanese tech, may involve the usage of tanks such as the Panzer IV, Japanese versions of them, or the Stug, or, the really horrific thought, a Japanese-made Tiger. Australia had no vehicle that could deal with these, should that kind of invasion actually occur, so plans were put into effect to immediately increase the firepower of the Sentinel tank for the defence of the Australian mainland. The first plan was to put in a 25-pounder gun, which was done. In fact, there was a turret test that involved putting in 2 25-pounders. The first of these became the AC-3 Thunderbolt, which used a snub-nosed version of a 25-pound howitzer, and at the time the Sentinel project was finally cancelled, the AC-4 was under development, which had 2 designs. One also included a 25-pounder, the second included the 17-pounder, which was a far more effective anti-tank gun. The Mark IV, and in fact the entire Sentinel project, was cancelled in July 1943, and the reason was quite simple. Sentinel was built to defend the Australian mainland, but by July 1943, Japan was losing ground in the Pacific. It had become very apparent that they lacked the manpower, the resources and the equipment to actually execute an invasion. On top of that, US production had gone up and Australia was receiving US designed tanks in large numbers. The need for Sentinel to defend Australia's home shores had vanished. But of course, she lives on here in War Thunder. So today we're driving out on the map Eastern Europe, and we are playing as a force of British and American tanks versus a force of German and Soviet tanks. Now of course this is a nightmare situation for British and American tanks. The Soviet and German tanks have a lot of big guns and a lot of high explosive packed inside of the shells they fire. They are incredibly dangerous. And this is also exactly the situation that I prefer to drive the AC out in, or at least be in it when I'm facing these kind of vehicles, because, well, excluding the massive driver's viewport letterbox on the right hand side of the front hull, this tank is fairly well armoured across the front and will take hits from large German and Russian tanks straight in the face and be able to survive them. There are a few spots that you can hit and pen, but providing you keep the tank angled and you are very careful about what you do, this tank will survive more than most. And nothing is more amusing than when you ricochet an 88mm shell from a Tiger inside of 20 metres straight off your front plate and then shoot them straight in the face. The reactions in chat can be quite colourful. Now I've just spotted a AAA truck moving in between these buildings and take a shot. Straight up the rear, it looks like we've taken out the gunner. Now I see the truck move off behind the gas tanks to the right hand side. I was contemplating putting a shot into those tanks, but I wanted to see whether or not he can poke his head back out. And then I realised he wasn't going to, and I can't really blame him. If I got shot up the arse by a 17-pounder, I would keep running in the opposite direction as well. So trying to move up. Now I am taking an awful risk here, driving alongside the river. However, I'm sort of betting that the German and Russian tanks are going to be inland more, and I wanted to sneak up on this engagement here. I'm we put one into the side of the T-34. Go through the reload. The reload time on this is really good. Second shot through, and there we go. T-34 is now out, and I'll take the AC-4 across the bridge. Now at this point, the enemy team is in charge of the control point. What I was trying to do is get around behind them. Coming directly through the front into the A point is likely going to be covered with German and Russian guns, but if I can get around behind them, the AC-4, with its fire rate, will very quickly take out anything from behind. Flanking them is simply the simplest way of dealing with the problem, but of course, again, this comes with a risk. To engage the control point from behind, I have to turn my back on the enemy's spawn point, and if something happens to drive up behind me, I can be in a world of trouble. Now, a shot just whistles past from the far side of the river. I suspect it was coming from my own team. I have absolutely no idea what the hell they were shooting at, however. There doesn't appear to be any targets up there that I can see. Now, at this point, I actually diverged off from my plan for a few moments. There are currently 3 allied tanks pushing on the A point all at once. Whatever is in there is going to be heavily engaged, and it should be at least a 3-on-1 to potentially a 3-on-2. I didn't want to push in on the A point as well, so instead of pushing there, I decided I was going to run down the street towards the enemy spawn point and see if I could intercept any potential reinforcements before they could reinforce the cap point. Or at least that was the plan up until the Tiger, which I now know is defending the cap point, started killing off the attackers one by one. So I better go back and actually deal with it as I first intended to. Now I'm going to approach the cap point one street in from the river. There is a bunch of debris that I can use for cover to try and put a little bit of defense on the front of the tank as I advance up. It also gives a very good view across the entire cap circle, so I should be able to find the enemy fairly easily. And bingo. One shot straight through the back of the tank, setting it on fire and destroying its engine. That removes its ability to move, and then one straight through the back of the turret, executing it. And then a wild Ostwind appears. And I love fighting these things in the Thunderbolt, especially when I'm angled right corner forward, because once you've got the Thunderbolt angled appropriately for the encounter, they can't pen you. They can pound you all day long, and they cannot pen your armour. So thank you very much for all the free points, but could you shut that gun up now, please? Thank you. And we quickly wait for the reload and line up the second shot, and that's it. Ostwind gone. I can't begin to tell you how many times I've been taken out by AAA guns pretending to be tank destroyers, which is ludicrous on the highest level. So I can't say it's not extremely satisfying to be able to just sit there and laugh at them while you're waiting for your reload to cycle. So, having eliminated the hostiles at the cap circle, it's time to quickly secure it for my team, because we are losing, and that's when... Uh-oh. That is a Dicamax. And if it has the highest penetration round it has available, both unlocked and loaded into that gun, that 10.5cm or a 105mm gun doesn't have so much of an issue getting through the front of the Thunderbolt's armour. Of course, my 17-pounder also won't have a problem getting through the front of his, so he knows I'm here, I know he's here, and we're in a little bit of a stalemate. Thankfully, I'm the one in the cap circle, so all I've got to do is sit here anyway and slowly cap it out for my team, and we're all good. But I tried to do something smart. I did drop an artillery strike on top of him, and he did just take a hit, and taking out the gun on a Dicamax is relatively easy. So I decided to try and back out to see whether or not that had happened. Turns out it hadn't. But no matter, the points I earned gave me the chance to bring out the Firebrand. I actually quite enjoy this on Ground Forces maps, or at least I did. The problem was I forgot about what Gaijin did to bombs in the start of patch 1.59. Now, apparently they've fixed it so this doesn't happen anymore now, but that didn't help me before the fix. Now, just to be clear, there were buildings between me and where that bomb exploded then, and still got taken out by the shrapnel. But no matter, I'll just redeploy the Thunderbolt. All those backup vehicles I got out might as well get used at some point. I do love this example of a bomb's effectiveness. That was a 250 kilogram bomb, and that's a Chaffee. It did not give the slightest shit that the 250 kilogram bomb detonated about 15 meters in front of it. But anyways, my eventful bombing run did have one upside. I did actually take out the tank that I was aiming for that was threatening the cap circle. right after it took out the one tank we had remaining defending the cap circle. So at the moment that zone is empty, but it has remained in our control, so we've managed to neutralise the points difference to the German-Russian team. Now all we have to do is keep it that way. Now we are under fairly constant air attack at this point. There is a hostile PE-3 and a Russian P-47 both in the air, and I believe a Messerschmitt 109 was up as well, although I'm less worried about the 109s while I'm driving around in a tank. Well, to be honest, I'm actually not concerned really with any of them, providing I keep moving. A 250 kilo bomb seems to have to land within about 10 meters to do anything to your tank whatsoever. Even a 1,000 kilo bomb has to land within 20. Unfortunately, my friend in the Chaffee forgot that he's meant to keep moving, but he did notify me that there is also a Ur-2 flying about somewhere. Now at this point we've overtaken the Russian-German team on points. We are now in the lead of the battle and we still have the A point secure. So once again I'm heading down towards the Russian-German spawn point, with the goal to intercept and eliminate any enemy forces that might come in on the A point. Unfortunately, one has already slipped past, and once again we have multiple tanks that are in the area around the A point, so I decide I'll let them deal with whatever has managed to slip through to A, and I will progress down and try and prevent anything else from coming through to the challenge. And at this point I was starting to get a little bit worried about whether or not they actually would manage to take anything out, and that's when I saw the KV-85 take out one of the Achilles that was moving in to try and hit A. I decided to wait to see whether or not they'd actually managed to stop the cap, but unfortunately they didn't, and once the cap circle was taken, that was when I decided to U-turn it back around and head back and take it back again. Arriving back at the cap circle, unfortunately I took a little bit too long and I wasn't able to take out the defenders myself, but I did arrive in just enough time to witness this beautiful M4 MG kill of this PE-2. Unfortunately I missed my shot on it, but still, that was wonderful. So, once again, we sit in the cap circle for a few seconds and we re-secure it so we don't end up losing this match. At this point I can already see there's no point in me trying to leave this area anymore. The point score is too close. I need to stay on point and keep defending this cap circle, otherwise we could potentially lose this match. Alright, so defending the cap point on any map you like. Don't try and defend a cap point by sitting in the centre of the cap point. It is a giant bombing target from the air, and generally the cap points themselves have very little in the way of cover. Once you have the cap point secured, find a place you can bury yourself. Otherwise, what I did to that Tiger earlier on, when I first secured the cap, that's what will happen to you. On Eastern Europe with a single central cap point, there's actually a perfect place for you to bury your tank, right next to the cap point. Right here. This set of buildings creates a U-shape. It is impenetrable from all sides except the front. Any vehicles that want to shoot you while you are parked in here, backed up against the wall, have to drive around the outsides and expose themselves first, and by simply parking with your nose aimed straight at the centre of the cap point, you're already angled at 45 degrees to both corners, well, almost 45 degrees to both corners. From this position, I've got to worry a little bit about the left-hand side, but I only need to twist the tank by about 10 or 15 degrees, and I'm angled perfectly. And the best part is, hardly anybody ever assumes that there could be somebody in there. They're so busy scanning the A point for potential defenders that they don't think to check their corners and leave themselves wide open. The U-shape of the buildings also gives you partial defense and cover from aircraft that are looking through spotting targets. Because you're in the shade in this sort of an area close to the rubble, you're a little bit harder to see, you're not moving around, and, well, coming in from the south, the east or the west, the building will cover the fact that you're there a little bit. And right as my next victim pops his way around the corner, the match comes to an end, but I still get to put one shot into him. So a victory, first place for the team with 5 kills, 2 assists and 2 capture points. Shadow Strike X3, Multi-Strike X2, we got the Ground Forces Rescuer, Base Capture X2, Tank Rescuer X3, Professional X5 and Final Blow. 43,600 silver lines, which would have been 65,400 if I had a premium account. Only 1,831 vehicle research points, but that's because I'm using a tier 3 tank or a rank 3 tank and I'm researching a rank 5 tank at the moment. So, 5 kills and 2 assists. Not the greatest match I've ever had in the Thunderbolt, not the greatest match I've had in Ground Forces, but it's pretty alright. Criticising my own performance here, I think the biggest thing that I probably should have taken away from this one is I should have played the objective far more. than I actually did. On this match, both times I had to travel from across the map in order to retake the capture zone. Now, the first time that this happened, it was perfectly acceptable. I thought the place was going to be defended. However, I should have seen from that the second time I should have just buried myself into that capture zone and stuck exactly where I finished that match, and just let the enemies drive up past me and shot them in the side over and over again. Eventually I would have attracted some artillery fire, but by then it would have been too late for them to do anything about preventing our winning, and it probably wouldn't have been such a close match. Second thing is, whenever Gaijin is playing around with bomb details, I need to remember to stop bringing aircraft that require dive bombing. I've got to bring in stuff that has a target reticle and can level bomb. And last but not least, when there is a Dicamax around the corner, don't assume its gun has been disabled just because it got hit by one piece of artillery. That was stupid. Anyways, ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. Please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below, and leave a like if you do, or a dislike if you don't. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll catch you on the battlefield.